Anthony Barr has an injury, groin injury, and he's questionable as well. Now, normally with someone of the star power of Anthony Barr, if they were questionable, you would say, oh, yikes, this could be a big advantage for those running backs coming out of the backfield. Josh Jacobs, DeAndre Washington, Jalen Richard, they love to throw to those guys. Ooh, this could be trouble. But Eric Wilson, this last week against Green Bay, and then last year in the games he played, was very good. And if Anthony Barr doesn't play and Eric Wilson is in for a week or two and is fine, if not good, he was good last week, I think that it's going to be fair to kind of look at that move to bring back Anthony Barr and say, maybe you should have just let him go to the Jets or wherever else he wanted to go. Because I did not come away from Anthony Barr's performance in Green Bay and think, oh boy, he was a game wrecker in a big game. It felt very much like, well, that's another one of the Anthony Barr no-shows that we've seen from time to time in games that, that have been kind of big. So I don't know. I think that conversation could be coming.
So these first two games to me have been Anthony Barr's career in a nutshell, right? First play, I think, from scrimmage of the season by the Falcons, Anthony Barr comes up on the line. You're like, oh, he's going to rush. He does. He basically gets let go, sacks Matt Ryan, and you're like, that's what we thought, right? That's what we thought. And then played a fine game that game. And then you're right. The Packers game from the press box, I didn't notice him once, Matthew. This is what I'm talking about and what we've discussed probably a ton. But Anthony Barr is the type of guy the Patriots say, dude, we really like you. We can't keep you. Sorry. Because we have to go sign, in the Vikings case, a guard, a center. Just think about this. If you had allocated if you had let Barr go and allocated that resource towards an interior offensive lineman to protect Cousins, to get Cousins one more piece. And I know it gets tiresome talking about all of the pieces that Kirk needs, but he needs them.
Yep.
So let's say we're talking right now about the Packer game, and boy, the left guard, they had signed a left guard and he played really well. And Bradbury, obviously, if you have a really good left guard, wouldn't be struggling as much as he currently is. And yes, you might miss Barr at times, but the interior of the line looks okay. Think about the difference in that discussion. And by the way, if that's the discussion, there's a very good chance the Vikings win that game.
So
I don't disagree with you.
How about this for a little breaking news?
Jalen Ramsey been traded to the Vikings?
New England Patriots have released Antonio Brown.
They did release him. Okay.
They've had enough. Yep. They have had enough.
Well, you saw what happened.
Yeah. Well,
once he intimidated somebody, that was going to be it.
You start intimidating someone who's part of a civil case, then you've had enough. And I mean, when they traded for him, you totally could have seen the Patriots going, okay, this is genius. The guy got out of there, or not traded for him, but signed him after Oakland released him.
Yep.
I thought it was really clever. Like, oh, well, he orchestrated his release, and I'm all for players getting to choose where they want to play and things like that. But then all the stuff that came down, I do believe that they were caught off guard by that. Mm-hmm. The other stuff that was involved with Antonio was mostly him just being sort of petulant. But then when we're talking about rape cases and we're talking about intimidating witnesses and things like that, he has gone so far over the top. I don't think the guy gets picked up by anybody else. I think this is it for him. I think his career is over.
I think that the league in the coming days will put him on the suspended list like they did Peterson.
Yep.
And so he's got a civil case pending against him. If I'm not mistaken, then another person a woman who was an artist doing work at his house, talked to SI,
yes,
correct?
Correct.
And that's the person that he accused of being broke and trying to extort money from him, despite the fact I don't think she was asking for money from him.
Correct.
And then the thing I read last night that was absolutely incredible was he basically tried to intimidate her by texting her on a text message thread that included his own lawyer.
Yeah.
So I'm telling you, man, there's a screw loose there. There's something wrong there.
I don't know.
Like, can you imagine going to your lawyer and being like, here's what I'm going to do?
I don't know anything about Antonio Brown as a person, but I will say that after he took some hits, especially the Vontaze Burfict one in that playoff game, all this stuff seemed to unravel with him. And I guess I thought it was a little bit ridiculous for too many people to start diagnosing him from outside, but it is very, very noticeable how his behavior changed from being just a team guy and everything else. And Ryan Clark, who's on ESPN and played with him, said that same thing. And going this far over the top to the point of threatening people, like his very threatening behavior to tag pictures of her kids and things in that text thread, like extremely threatening behavior by him. That's a point where even the New England Patriots, who believe that they can handle just about anybody's BS, have to say, okay,
but you know what?
Are out.
I give them credit for this. The Patriots will take on problems, but because in Belichick's world, it has nothing to do with humans. He doesn't care about that. You are gone instantly.
Yeah.
Like there's no, we signed him and we really should stick with him. The Patriots say, you know what? We thought it might work. It didn't work. You're gone.
And they're always willing to just say, okay, it didn't work. See you. Like
Hainsworth.
Like they didn't hang on to it very long with Hainsworth either.
Hainsworth was the same thing. They just said, bang, you're done.
So let me circle back to the point. So that's what happened. Antonio Brown released by the Patriots. My guess is that the guy is done playing NFL football after this. This goes way beyond goofy Instagram videos and things like that, or Facebook lives in the locker room, way beyond that. This person is a liability to have around your organization, clearly. Circling back to the Anthony Barr conversation, though, Eric Wilson has now only played 377 NFL snaps. So we can't just say Eric Wilson is the starting linebacker and everything else. But last year, looking at his success as a pass rusher, and it was only on a handful of snaps, but it was a very similar type of ratio to snaps, about 1 of every 10 where he was pass rushing. He got 6 pressures, which was 2 sacks, 3 quarterback hits in a hurry in 31 pass rush snaps, which is about the same ratio or so as what Anthony Barr has done for his career. And even in just 2 pass rush snaps, he got a quarterback hit in one of them just this week against the Green Bay Packers. And I can't help but wonder how much of Anthony Barr's success, even when it comes to the pass rush, is just the way that Mike Zimmer has schemed it up for the linebackers in those positions. I mean, the sack by Anthony Barr week 1 is a great example. Atlanta is completely baffled. They take the snap. Nobody blocks him. He gets a sack. Great job, superstar. But you didn't do anything other than just what any football player would have done at that moment, which is walk right in and sack Matt Ryan.
Right.
And I am not saying that Anthony Barr, and I wrote that it was a good idea to bring him back. I'm not saying he's not a great player. He can be. He could be a valuable weapon in a league that wants to throw to running backs all the time, but he's great at tracking them down, and so is Eric Hendricks.
Sure.
But it's really about the price that you paid for him over whoever the next best guy is, and Eric Wilson is the next best guy. And I'll just give you the PFF numbers. Last year, Eric Wilson, his grade out of 100, and sometimes it's hard to kind of like understand these, but out of 100, 64.4. And Anthony Barr, I'll pull that up in a second here, but Anthony Barr's was not much higher than that. I believe it was 71. So what's the drop off for a lot of money and a huge long-term contract?
All right. This is a great road. I'll go down it and ask you this question then. And it's probably too late now, but should the Vikings' fundamental philosophy with Spielman and Zim at the top of the food chain, should it have been this? Mike, I know that you're going to request, and I will grant it, to draft a lot of defensive players high. I also know that your scheme and ability to teach those players will make them very good players. So, Matthew, should the philosophy have been this? I will do that for you. We're going to use a lot of top picks on defensive players, but the trade-off is when those guys age, second contract, they're out the door, and that money
Except corners.
Okay, but that's my question, and then what we'll do is we'll turn around and flip that money towards going to get second contract offensive players because I know that you don't develop them.
By the way, 71.4. So last year, Eric Wilson, when he was in, not a huge drop off. Both are kind of around average. And the biggest issue with Anthony Barr is when he's great, he is great. But when he's not, it is really poor. And this week against Green Bay, it was really poor. And they completed 8 passes on 8 attempts into his coverage this last week. He got 2 pressures on 9 pass rushes. Is about what he usually does. So if he's not an edge rusher and he's not a game changer from coverage, which he's never really been, then why did you pay him this much money? So it's a little bit contradictory. Like I thought it was probably a good idea because he fits so well in the system. He's so smart. He's a great NFL player.
But it was a lot of money, and you needed help at other positions.
Exactly. But you were not in a position with a rookie quarterback contract or something.
Does my point make sense?
No, absolutely.
Should that have been the working procedure?
Well, and you look at how some of these have worked out. I mean, okay, so Everson Griffin, he had his struggles last year, but he's mostly great. So, okay, well, he makes sense to keep on a second contract. But, your Xavier Rhodes, well, there's some slipping off there that maybe you look at it and say.
And Hunter, by the way, signed a contract that was so team favorable, you have to do that.
So I would not say unequivocally you just can't sign these guys. I would say it really depends on the person. And it depends sometimes on the age, the mileage on their body. Danielle Hunter signs at age 23.
Yeah, that's a great deal.
Like what?
Yep.
You're getting a second contract by the time you're the same age as Garrett Bradbury when they drafted him. That was just pretty incredible. But aside from looking at it that way, the overarching thing is you have to be able to look at it and say, well, who is giving me truly great value for what I'm going to pay them over the next best person? So an example would be Jalen Ramsey. If you were going to sign Jalen Ramsey to a $20 million a year contract and he plays the way that he's capable of playing, that's 1,000% worth it. I mean, that is a shutdown corner. He makes every game a nightmare for opposing quarterbacks. He's not going to allow the other team's number one receiver to dominate you in a passing league. That is worth it. A linebacker who's only a little bit better than Eric Wilson, who's undrafted,
right?
Maybe not so much is worth it. I'm sure there's some details that Mike Zimmer could tell me, well, Barr can do this and he can't do that. But the value toward winning is what you're really focused on here.
And what are the positions at which you can find guys? Like defensive ends, really good ones are hard to find. Cornerbacks, really good ones are hard to find. I would argue linebackers across the board, you can find them.
I think
so. And develop them and
yes.
draft them and develop them.
I think so, yes. And the fact that Eric Wilson was a guy who came in as a special teamer and then proved himself as a special teamer and worked his way up. I mean, they have him. Ben Gideon has been pretty solid. Not that I'd want him to play the same role as Barr, but as another guy who's not a first-round draft pick, still pretty good. And I think linebacker is one of those positions. Receiver is tough to pick early on. A lot of times you have to wait and see how people develop. I would absolutely, though, pay any receiver who's good. I would pay any tackle who's good. I would pay any corner who's good. And maybe the Vikings have a rare situation with these edge rushers. I normally wouldn't pay edge rushers this much, but these two guys I would, if that makes sense, because I think that they're everywhere now. They're everywhere in the draft. Look at the draft. It's like everybody's taking edge rushers now because there's so many freaks out there. These two guys are particularly
And that Hunter
incredible.
contract is such a good contract for the team, I should